Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Laura with Connect My Brain. And we are working on a series called Childhood Development. And we have been working through this for a few weeks now. We started off talking about developmental milestones because recently there's been a change by the CDC that is telling us that it's okay if your child is late with crawling, late with walking, late with talking, and there could be nothing further from the truth. And I think that's one of the things that really motivated this particular series because, children, they don't come with instructions. They have no point of reference to tell us what's going on. We have to have some signposts that say, I'm supposed to be doing this by this time, and therefore, please watch me and be alerted if you don't see me doing it. I think the developmental milestones are very important. In fact, when I look at a child, it's so interesting. You can really pick these things up even while you're doing a developmental assessment. For example, a child goes through a very particular progression to just get their body going. So you come into this world and you're flexed, meaning you're balled up. And around the third or fourth month, you start to open yourself up. There's a reflex that's actually helping you learn how to extend and fold around the center of your belly, your core. Then you're going to start to, in the even earlier than that, you'll lay on your belly. You'll lay with your fists together and your arms very close to your body. Then you'll begin to reach out to the forearm and then eventually the shoulders and the top of the chest, getting more involved in that belly, and then eventually the pelvis and up onto the legs. So the upper body happens before the lower body. So there should be a great connection between the timing of how the upper body moves and the lower body moves. Think about how we walk for a minute. We have a reciprocal arm swing. So if we step out with our right foot, our left arm comes forward. Our upper body and our lower body have a timing. So I can do a jumping jack with a child or have the child do the jumping jack, and age appropriate, around 4.5, they should be able to do a jumping jack. And we're looking at the timing between their upper body and their lower body. Now, especially if they just jump right into it, they've obviously had somebody begin to show them how to do a jumping jack. But what is their perception inside? Sometimes I see it perfectly. Other times I see a lag between the time of the arms going up and the legs coming apart. Or sometimes the arms do the motion and the legs do nothing but jump up and down. They don't step out like a letter A in that kind of a posture. So the timing is off. Well, what does that have to do with? Well, that has everything to do with development. So when you come into this world, you are fully formed, but you are not fully functioning. You're down in your brainstem. And there's going to be all kinds of neurons that are just exploding up in that brain before you get here and the first few years. And so these networks have specialty centers, and they're going to set up camp on each side of the brain, but they're going to have a different function. For example, the desire to talk is on the right-hand side. The work that goes into talk, like doing a podcast, making sure there is some kind of organized presentation, all of that happens on the left side of the brain. However, in order to deliver the podcast, there has to be a need and a want to do this, as well as the work coming together. That's the timing. And so when we think about when a child does something, it's preparing them for so many different steps that they're going to take later on. So if they miss something in the beginning or they do it later, then that means that something about what typically should happen is also going to be changed. I think it's very important for us to be aware of these milestones. And I would not encourage anyone to go with the new schedule, because I think it's going to mean that we have more children that are going to get lost in a system, and consequently their optimal development is going to be altered. If you didn't get an opportunity to go back and listen to that particular podcast, it was the first one we did in this particular series that we really addressed what the CDC has changed for the pediatric population. Then we kind of stepped into that concept of developmental delay. There are so many children that are not developing as expected. There's been waves of it decades ago, and it continues to happen. And our world over the last 2 years has really accelerated many of these numbers. So I think it's very important for us to know what is developmental delay. It carries so many different names. Any of the names, autism, Asperger, attention deficit, oppositional defiance, especially in our pediatric population, all of those can be traced back to the child's development. You can find the red flag where the steps, something was either too early, too late, or it didn't come together as expected, and this is going to change what should happen for that child as that child moves through the progression of development. And there's many, many stages to that. Today we're going to talk about the gut in just a few minutes, but it too has a developmental window. In fact, when you come into this world, there are so many things that still have to go on, and it is going to take the human gut 2 years to finish its development. So that's a developmental window. So it's going to matter what happens during that period of time. After we went into defining developmental delay, we talked about stress. And stress is one of those words that we just kind of throw out there, but it really has a physiological meaning. Some things really do go on inside every single time you have a stress response. Now, we kind of get it when we feel stressed out, but for example, all the masking that has gone on for our children, when we cover the face, they were not getting enough oxygen. And some places, this is still going on for the pediatric population. In fact, in the office, we do a lot of aerobic activity, and we asked mom and dad during the time of COVID if we could take the mask down while they're doing aerobics, because I certainly didn't want to rob them of any oxygen while they were actually exercising. We kept ours on, and kept our distance from the child. But it was so important for when the child is actually doing their activity that they could get oxygen. Did you know in 20 seconds, if your oxygen levels go down, that immediately triggers a fight or flight response? I talked about it in that stress podcast because it relates back to what's called the Moro reflex. And we will absolutely have several podcasts on primitive reflexes so that you can really understand the function. But this is about the earliest wiring that goes on for baby human. So we can also have an event like a mask that's going to cause a stress response. Just everything that's been going on, we've heard from many different entities, as I'm sure you have, that the stress levels have just been so high. Well, if mom's going through stress, either prior to the conception, during the pregnancy, mom or dad, it is going to influence the development of the baby. There's an event that goes on when we are stressed. we literally shunt the blood away from the gut, which is going to rob us of absorbing our vitamins and minerals. We also shunt the blood from the front of the brain for the executive function to the back of the brain in order to prepare a posture for handling a threat, because that's what the brain sees, or perceives, I should say. Now, we can have several different things go on that can lead to a chronic stress pattern, just like the last 2 years. So, we want to understand the difference between acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is absolutely essential to make yourself stronger, like a vigorous workout. That's stress on the system, but it's making the body stronger. Now, if I work out so hard that I'm leading to injury, or I allow myself to run in a mental loop all the time that I'm either bothered or unhappy or anxious or feeling stressed out, we can generate a chronic stress pattern, which is literally going to give a feedback message that your brain only thinks that you know how to fight or run. And you'd be really surprised how many kids I've met over the years that literally have this pattern. They would literally run out the door or just be in a fight. And this is literally a chronic stress pattern. This is who the brain thinks the person is. And that feedback has to be broken. Here in the office, we can actually measure the stress response, and that way we can quantifiably tell, are you in a chronic stress pattern? And if so, begin to help break that pattern. It is very important to break this message of threat in order for the development of the child or even your own well-being to improve. Now, the last time we talked about the birth process. This is very important in looking at this whole idea behind developmental delay, because there's so many things that go on during the birth process that's going to finish some of those primitive reflexes, get the big squeeze on the brain. If you didn't listen to the last one, I really encourage you, listen to the last podcast. It is very important that children go through that birth canal. Now, again, certain things are going to happen and they might be out of our control, and we might end up with a C-section. But there's great things that can be done to influence the neurology of that baby so it begins to go forward. Now, that kind of brings us up to today's topic, where we want to understand about feeding our babies. And we're also going to tie it into the toddler, the school age, and even yourself. You know, food is a very interesting item. I think, if anything, if somebody is going to have a hard time with the program, it's going to be that they have to look at their diet. They have to change things. And there's a lot of things that go on with some kids. If you've never really stepped into the world of pediatric development or getting your child evaluated for development, and you might be in a situation where your child's a very picky eater. You can't get them to eat but only this. But those are red flags, and we'll talk about that next time, or 2 times down. Next time is actually the chemistry of the body, and then we're going to do red flags. But picky eaters, especially as a child, is a huge red flag. They should want to go towards everything, even if it is just to try it. Now, of course, we're going to have likes and dislikes, but I'll tell you, a lot of that gets generated by how soon you begin to feed your baby some of those more traditional items, especially on the sweeter side. We also have a situation today where formula is in a scarcity. And I also have a few ideas that I want to leave with the podcast, and hopefully you can share this with someone because it might be a really great opportunity to look at something different than traditional formula. But let's kind of back up to where it all gets started. And so, when we were talking about the birth process last time, one of the points I brought up was a expected delivery. What should happen? And one of those things is about the baby being put the newborn that right out of the womb should be put to the mother's breast. And many instances, that baby will literally begin to latch on to mom. Now, it's going to take a little while for mom's milk to come in, but it's part of the process. It's actually stimulating mom, hey, I'm out here, so you need to get ready to feed me. Now, the other thing that we talked about was the amount of bacteria that going through the birth canal literally ensures that the baby is going to get exposed to good, healthy, normal bacteria in order to begin influencing their immune system. Now, remember what I just said. The gut takes 2 years to complete its maturation process, while the immune system, which most of it's in your gut, it takes 3 years to complete its maturation system. So what's going on during that time is what's going to be the role model in order to influence the health of that child. So the things that are going on right now for people that are in a real struggle to find formula, we really need to kind of talk about this and see what we can do to assist. So one of the things that I would really encourage you is to, if you're not going to breastfeed, that you become aware prior to the delivery of what venue you're using to deliver your baby. Are you going to be at home? Are you going to be at a hospital? If you're going to be at a hospital, what are they going to give your baby? And this is where I would begin to identify the pros and cons, looking in, doing your own research, and realizing that most of these formulas today, they are synthetically generated and they have soy. And giving a baby soy, lots of times it's not just about giving an upset stomach. It can also be an endocrine disruptor because soy is estrogen based. So I would encourage you absolutely no soy. And I would also recommend that you look into a variety of different options out there outside of just commercial grade formula. Most of the commercial grade formula has or comes from cows that have been treated with RBST, which is a growth hormone. And some avenues want to say that there is no significant findings, but just even that language alone for me is enough to go. There are some findings, but they don't want to put that kind of a label on it. And we really do have to be careful because it isn't just about the formula. There's a lot of growth hormone that can be used in our food supply. And I would say probably 15 years ago, there was an increase of children beginning secondary sex characteristics way too early. It's been very interesting to me in practice, the waves of things that have come through, and you begin to really see how many children are impacted, where I might get just a few of those now because I think most people are aware that they need to really know what's in their food supply. And so as it was becoming known, more people learned how to investigate their food choices. And so we've seen a little bit of a decline of it. So that's beneficial. And I think we have to do the same thing, because the wave that has been through my office in the last 4 years is always attention deficit. That's always at the top of the charts. And then it is meltdowns. And then it is children literally being kicked out of school, kindergarten and above. And it is children with anxiety and anger. So that's been the wave today. And there's many reasons behind all of that, and every individual is uniquely different as well. So it's about working with somebody like me to really peel back the layers, peel back the history, look at the blueprint of how this individual got wired, and what are the patterns that you can begin to break down and look at and match back to the child, so that you can really personalize their program so that they can get optimal results. I mean, that's really what we're looking for. So instead of commercial grade formula, I'd love for you to go look at a website called GermanFormulaExpress.com. There are many options on there, and I literally have experienced many people that have used these products successfully. So what I would like for you to do is to look at the product, look at the ingredients. I want you to become the best ingredient comparison shopper that you could possibly become, so that you can give your baby the best chance at beginning gut maturation, where it's going to move in the right direction. Because there's just a lot that goes on in there that not only will it impact them right now, they could have reflux, they could have diarrhea, constipation, they could just be irritable, and somebody's going to call it colic, and fussy and not sleeping. And yes, that's going to weigh a lot on you, but it's in an optimal time of development, and we really don't want that kind of a pattern. Again, we'll say this at the end of the podcast, but anytime that you want to have a complimentary consultation and just talk about a topic with me, so I can either help you out on a patient-doctor basis or maybe guide you in a direction, we're here. Connect My Brain. This is what we are about. We're here for our community, and our community is the world. Now, another one that I want you to look at is, I want you to look at westonprice.org. WESTONA Price, PRICE.org. And they've got literally a baby formula recipe, and it will answer many questions and give you tips on, if you already know that your child has a sensitivity, what you can do differently in putting your formula together. There are many resources also where you can look for a good quality milk as your base, or how you can look up some different components of making your own formula by understanding the need for no pasteurization and why we don't want that. So it's really important to understand that when we pasteurize, we are taking out all of the good bacteria, and we are also taking out the enzymes. And this is typically what is linked to why children down the road have a problem digesting cow's milk, because whatever you buy in the store will absolutely be pasteurized and altered. So there's a lot of good connections in this area on the website so that you can look at putting together your own formula. I personally think that that's an ideal situation. I know that there is a lot of stress trying to put something together, but let's look at it as it's just a new step. And whenever we're trying to learn something new, it does. It takes a little bit of effort. It takes a little bit of pulling everything together, but then you practice it and you're in the flow. To me, it's a pay me now, pay me later relationship. If we keep putting in artificial into the baby's belly, it is absolutely going to change their development, and I have not seen a case where that hasn't been true. So I really encourage you, and it could be a few other things besides just the formula. So formula, or really any type of change in composition. So like even the shaft of the wheat turning into a loaf of bread. Think of the shaft of the wheat to the loaf of the bread. There are so many changes that have to go, that wheat has to go through in order to become this commercial loaf of bread on the shelf. Milk is the exact same way. Formula is the exact same way. Breast milk is a liquid. Formula is typically a powder. That's why I love that I found this German formula, because it's a liquid. So you've got a better chance of matching your little baby's digestive system so that they can adapt. Remember what we talked about, our 5 categories, that they can adapt and be able to actually have ease in their digestion. We don't want stress. So every time we put something in their belly that they're not agreeing with, that can cause a chemical stress. So that's part of the equation of stress. But it can also be, let's say we have the powder. What kind of water are you using? Are you using tap water? What's the quality of your tap water? I would strongly encourage everyone to get a water report. It's really important to know what you're ingesting. I see kids where they may have none of the typical insults that cause regression of development. But when we do like an oats test, where we're looking at how the body is eliminating toxins through urine and to see what levels of toxins are there, many of those are in comparison to what water system you're using. Not only for a baby bottle, but bathing in, 20 minutes in a hot tub, you're absorbing everything into your skin and ultimately into your bloodstream. What are you putting the formula and water in? Is it a plastic bottle? Is it BPA free? Is it just a plastic bottle? When you add hot water, there are all kinds of synthetic situations in that plastic bottle that will literally leak into what the baby is drinking. Do you take that bottle and put it in a microwave? So I've got a little interesting science project you can do about microwaves. So for example, if you take a plant and you take water that you've heated up in a microwave and you use that water to feed a plant, and then feed the other plant rainwater or tap water, but just not microwavable water, and watch what happens to the growth of the plant. Just something interesting. And I'd love to hear your feedback if you actually do it. because it really might wake up your mind to it really does matter how we eat. So let's kind of move on and go into toddler and school age and things of that nature, because one of the things that we want to do is we want to time the introduction of foods. And the recommendation is that you wait till your child actually has teeth. The teeth are representative that I have enzymes present to break down foods. One of the common complaints that I get in histories is as soon as they introduced food, the baby became constipated because the baby couldn't break it down. And sometimes it does associate with that they had no teeth yet. So there's the possibility I just didn't have the enzymes present. And then a lot of jar baby food, certainly it can have individual foods in there. But again, if it's commercial, it's going through a huge process to go from wherever it's grown to the grocery store, when it's really easy to take different fruits and vegetables. And I would always start with vegetables. And really the first food I would start with is an avocado. Breast milk and what they even advertise for formula is how much fat is available, because that is the first part of the calorie intake that a baby needs. So avocados are really good fats, and mashing it up and you can even put a little breast milk in it, or maybe some formula that you've made yourself, or this German-based formula that I was telling you about. And you can even make it creamy so it has more of that typical traditional cereal approach. But I'm going to really put some caution. Cereals are grains, and really putting grains in your baby's belly at first typically is going to lead to all kinds of gut disruption. So I would try to really focus on making your own baby food rather than buying jars of food. Then they'll start to go and make almost like a 3-course meal in a jar. If you do that too soon, babies have a hard time breaking down protein, and it literally is meant to be the third calorie coming into the equation. Now, making a little bit of a comparison for the toddler and the school age, if your child is avoiding any foods, especially proteins, because it is a harder molecule to break down, that is also a red flag that will help you understand. I may not be able to break this down with ease. And in fact, I'm actually getting a little tummy ache. And so I'm just going to kind of push back. And this can be why we start seeing a child look more like a picky eater. Let that kind of behavior really open up your eyes. Why isn't my child exploring? Children should have the opportunity to make a mess, get it all over the place. It's so good for tactile and connection, hand feeding self. Remember what we talked about in an earlier podcast. Once our babies get here, at first, we're taking care of them. We're attending to them. And then our goal is to help them attend to themselves. This is what growing up and paying attention to others is all about. So having that opportunity to get messy, to try different things, is going to really cut down on this tactile sensitivity, texture sensitivity, and exploring more and finding some foods. I would also recommend that when we're thinking about feeding, go seasonal and go local. A lot has even changed in one of my favorite grocery stores, but everything is coming from California, and I live in Georgia. So honestly, it's not really the best food that I could possibly be eating. In order to get it here to Georgia, they've got to pick it early. And you're changing the quality of your food by picking it early. I've now do most of my shopping through Fresh Harvest, and I have it delivered right to my door, and I get local fruits and vegetables, and I think that is a really smart way to go. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll give them a call and see if we can create a little relationship, and our subscribers could get maybe a little discount for connecting to something like that, if that's something that would interest you. I really believe in community. I believe in bridging together. I believe it's important for all of us to help one another in moving forward and finding some joy in our life. I think it's a very important part of our overall well-being. So how does this really relate to developmental delays? Well, I'm going to finish up just kind of by describing that if mom and even dad, if you had food sensitivities going into your pregnancy, there's a higher likelihood that your child had food sensitivities. If you had interruptions in the birth process and it didn't go quite as expected, there's a higher risk for developmental delay. Now that we're out here and we still have got windows of development, if there is a lot of stress around feeding that belly while it is going through its maturation process, things are going to change. One of the things that I will talk about in the next podcast on the chemistry part is that every single time we have an inflammatory reaction, especially during those open windows of development, we're now programming the cell on how to work. And so lots of times, if we could catch this stuff really early on, before age 3, we've got a much better opportunity of changing the path. The longer we wait, this now, again, just like that thermostat, if it's just running all the time, so is the inflammatory process in the gut. You need your gut to be working right to feed and support the growth of your brain. You need your food to be absorbing into your body so that you can have the vitamins and minerals that you need. Every pathway is requiring vitamins and minerals that it's expected to get from your food in order even to just generate energy to run the body, and energy just to be. So it is so important that we take a look at what we're feeding our children. And I know this is such a daunting task. I totally understand that. But there are some great connections in our community and across the globe that feel the same way. And today, it's actually, I believe, it's much easier than it even was 5 years ago to get cleaner products, to become more aware of the ingredients. If you want to be really on task for your child, you need to be able to read every ingredient on everything that you are feeding your child and understand what it is, because it will generate either support or reaction. One of the things that we do in our office is a 3-day food log. I don't want anybody to change a thing. I want to see, how do you eat? Most of the kids that come to this office, I'm going to say probably 99.9, they're all a bunch of little picky eaters. And you can see the patterns that the parents have gotten into in order to just feed their child. Now, no one needs to take any judgment on this, because it happens. And this is why we're here to support you, so that we can look at it. Look at how your family likes to eat. We don't want to tell you how to eat. We want to tell you your style of eating, if you will work at it from this direction and use cleaner products, you will begin to change the health of your gut as well as your child's gut. We always recommend, too, that we don't isolate the child while we're going through this process. We want the whole family to participate. And every family that has really brought the nutritional direction for everyone, these families, mom and dads, have lost weight. They feel more energized. They feel more focused. And everybody in the family is benefiting from how we are actually feeding our body. I mean, let's face it, that this is how the human body lives. It lives by the food that we eat. So our food needs to be something that is pristine, high quality. And I know there's also a cost. You better believe it. So here's a recommendation. If you have the ability to grow some food, I think you should do that. I'd create planter boxes if you don't know about your soil in your backyard, or maybe you don't really have a backyard. Planter boxes are wonderful. You can get high quality wood, make the planter box, and put your own dirt in it, and get yourself organic seedlings. This is the time to do it. Or you get little starter plants, but make sure they're quality. Don't get something that's been saturated in pesticides. But what a wonderful way to teach your child where food comes from and how to be part of the process of making it happen from dirt, or from seed, dirt to table. Also, when we play in the dirt, that's where the minerals are. So we want some good dirt. And we would be out in the sunshine, and we would be getting the benefit of sun for vitamin D and our immune system. And we would just bring that whole connection together for the whole family. I think it's a great way for families to come together. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you learned a few pearls. If you've got questions, you always know that you can call the office, 678-501-5172. You can also go on our website, connectmybrain.com, and you can send me a message. You can tell me, I heard your podcast and I have a question. Could I set up a call? I'd love to chat with you. We're also going to be introducing a survey. We're looking for, what are you interested in? What do you want to learn about? That's what making a podcast is so fun to me, and how I can be connecting to my community. Also, we've got some freebies on there, and you get a chance to go take a look at our eSchool. Well, again, thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a great rest of your week, depending upon when you listen to this podcast. Take care.